The one point I wanted to bring up is Priya Parker talks about the importance of curating your guest list when you have in real life events. And the one thing about her book that sticks out to me the most is she says you need to decide who's not supposed to be in the room.
And it is also important that you consciously take efforts to educate your community about the policies. It could be a part of your onboarding process or your welcome message, or you could reach out to them separately at a later point in time, because probably you don't really want to overwhelm them, as soon as they join your community with all these rules and restrictions, right? So
I think one thing very important to remember, right, like when you're thinking about systems to integrate, right, like think about what is the purpose and what really are you trying to optimize by introducing this system there. Again, I'll give you context behind this.
Welcome to another session of Communityhood. Today, it's a very, very interesting topic that we picked. I think based on my interaction with a lot of community builders, as soon as they hit, let's say, few hundred members, this is one thing which becomes very, very important in their mind. So I'm talking about moderation. I'm sure all of you are aware of it. Just quick background about myself. I'm the founder and CEO of LikeMinds, which is the sort of community platform provider for Communityhood. At LikeMinds, we enable community platform infra for businesses. And Communityhood is our way to sort of educate everyone, and we believe in gathering knowledge from different sources available on internet, and with this event, I think it's been almost 1.5 year or so since we launched doing different events. We have done more than 70-80 events at Communityhood, and today's session is all about how we can handle our members in a civil way. How do we make sure that they get the most out of it from the community, and how do we keep things sane as we scale. So without sort of further taking a lot of time, let me quickly, introduce my panel today. First up, I want to quickly introduce Avni. Avni, I'm sure all of you are already aware of what she does, but still want to give you a quick background about her. Avni started, as far as I remember, her community career formally with She Rose, where Avni had sort of a very important role to play in the initial journey of the platform. And post that, she worked at, I think she started her own sort of initiative called Love Doctor, which was also, a people first business in a way. And post that, she has been with Meta as a consultant and has been working in multiple capabilities with different social impact communities beyond her sort of formal role as well. So welcome, Avni. Very, very excited to have you here.
Thank you. I love being with you all, and this community is so wonderful. Don't be shy. Ask us all the questions. We're all really nice people, and super, super excited to have this conversation with the best of the best. Aswati and Shelton are I'm a fan, so excited to be here with them.
Awesome. Cool. Let me introduce my second guest for the day. Shelton, you all would have heard of this concept of alt MBA, if not like STOA, but I'm sure STOA is a fairly popular brand today, at least in India, where, Shelton has been like with them, almost from the beginning. I remember my first conversation with Shelton when he was in Goa. This is even before we had launched Community Hood. So Shelton has been a very, very sort of strong pillar behind the community initiatives at STOA. In fact, our current community manager, Devya, is also an ex-alumni of STOA. So super excited and thankful, Shelton, for training people like Devya. uh, you know, you know, I think it's very fascinating, right? Like where people who are aspiring to do an alt MBA are taking community careers. So I am very, very excited about that. So yeah, welcome, Shelton.
Thanks, Nipun. Honestly, thanks for that wonderful intro. That has given my confidence 5 points in boosting it. But yeah, always loved doing events around community, talking about community. I think this is, in the last few years, it's been an interesting space to watch grow, especially since the pandemic. I've been in the space for about 4.5 years. And honestly, honored to be on this panel with Avni and Aswati as well. Like, I mean, they have worked in amazing organizations and done like spectacular things and working in like big companies, right? I'm merely here from like this young emerging startup in the last few years, and we're still growing. So even in terms of my community journey, I do think that I have a long way to go here as well. So I'm looking forward to learning more, learning as much as contributing here. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Cool. Time for me to introduce my final guest for the day. It took us a lot of time for me to meet her. Because she's not based out of India. But finally, we were able to get her. Aswati is co-founder of Community Simplified, which is a community consulting firm. She is co-founded it with one of my good friends, Neha, who I keep interacting very often, but this time we managed to get her. Quick background about Aswati. I think she started her community career with Quora, where she was very, very active in the Malayalam community, where like it was like when she joined Quora, I think there was no dedicated Malayalam community, and she built it from scratch there. Huge focus on user engagement, satisfaction, growth. And after Quora, she had a small stint at Baby Chakra, which is, again, a venture where we keep seeing a lot of community builders out from. So I'm sure she has a lot of valuable insights from, that stint as well. And, post that, she's been helping various brands on different stages of community growth with Community Simplified. Happy to have you here, Aswati. Welcome to Community Hood.
Thank you, Nipun. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. Cool. Very quickly, just starting, this panel with my first section, where I want to understand from all of you about, how different sizes and categories of communities affect the moderation skills. So quick background, look, it is not same when you're managing a community on WhatsApp, which is, let's say, of size, let's say 50 or 100, versus managing a community like Quora or a Meta, where there are literally millions or maybe billions of people using those platforms. So what changes with the scale and different categories? So I want to start with Avni. Avni, what has been your sort of experience? How some of the things change, based on different types of communities in terms of moderation?
Yeah, thanks. This is a good question and a great place for us to start. I think the thing that I noticed the most, primarily while at She Rose, and for those of you who don't know, She Rose is basically a mega community of different types of women's communities. And when we started, we were building a proprietary app, and so we seeded first 30 communities on She Rose. Prior to that, all the communities were on WhatsApp. And so the big change that I noticed, so they're on WhatsApp and on Facebook, in Facebook groups. The big change that I noticed, Nipun, is that there was more adherence from management and even our team to this idea of what is our brand voice. So, you're out there on social media, you're using like these free platforms, things can be a little bit more casual and fluid. Even in terms of the way that we were moderating the spaces, there wasn't like a set time that we all needed to be online. It was more like a conversational space. Whereas as soon as the communities came into our own app, we thought a lot about what is the literal voice? How are we going to type things out? What is the feeling that we want people to have when they come into the subset of communities? How do we want to leave people? We definitely knew we wanted to leave people better than we found them, but what does that look like when it comes to community moderation? And interestingly enough, as I started hiring our first set of community managers and training them, one of the things that I learned, and this is something that Sairi, the founder, taught me, is that all of us are here because we know the basic principles of community management and community leadership. You can take so many courses and certifications on that, but you can't train for voice. So someone either gets what your brand voice is intuitively or they don't. And so that was a really big learning in terms of moving from sort of those smaller, very small communities that were tiny, and we had 100, 200, 300 of them, or the Facebook group, to moving within the app and then scaling to, millions of women and more. We always prioritize that voice first.
Got it. Interesting. So the voice becoming sort of uniform becomes important as you sort of scale and as you start sort of becoming a brand. Got it. Awesome. Aswati, what's been your sort of experience with this?
Yes, I agree with everything Avni said, because the entire moderation process is completely based on your brand's values, right? So anything that you do within the community should basically reflect your core values. So your moderation guidelines, policies, everything will be created or designed based on that, right? So based on the size, as your community grows, what happens is you'll see that a lot of people will come to you with feedback regarding your moderation process. And it is very important for you to keep revisiting it again and again to make necessary changes. But when you do that, you'll always have to keep your values again in your mind. You don't really deviate from it, but then it's very important for you to listen to your crowd as well, because whatever you're doing is for the crowd. So if you don't listen to them, if you don't take their feedback, right, it's going to make people want to leave. So so you need to keep revisiting, you need to keep going back to your community to understand what works and what doesn't. So that's what happens when your community scales. And another change is that when you have a small community, you can talk to people personally. It's person to person. Whenever there's a moderation action, you can communicate directly with the community member as to why it is being taken. It's important for you to make them aware why moderation process is in place, and it can be personal. But as you scale, it might not be possible. Your community manager or anybody who's responsible in communicating with these members might not really be able to talk to everybody out there, right? So you'll have to set up a process where users can question your moderation process, let's say a ticketing system, right? Or an appealing system. So that's one change that's seen when your community scales. It's important for you to set it up.
Sure.
Yes. And regardless of the size and type of the community, transparency is very, very important. You need to communicate with your community members as to why there are certain processes and why it is important to follow the protocols or policies or guidelines.
Sure, understood. Can you also cover maybe an example of how, let's say, the moderation changed at Quora for, let's say, a specific community A versus community B? Maybe something you guys did in terms of moderation for a specific community?
So Quora, Quora doesn't have different communities. Of course, it has language-specific communities.
Yeah.
But then I was handling Quora Malayalam. So the policies were already designed, right? Quora has its basic policies in place. But then, based on the feedback from our users, we were able to understand what was considered sensitive when it comes to certain topics, because it's a general interest community, and we were able to design certain policies and guidelines around that based on the feedback from the users. And also we were able to have a lot of volunteers who were reporting content that were against the policies, and they took the responsibility in their hands that they wanted the space to be very safe and clean. So it was wonderful that a lot of users took the responsibility that they would report every time when there was something off in the community.
Sure, makes sense. So I think what I'm hearing is, just summarizing this part, when you're small, involve your early members into the moderation process very, very early on, build transparency, build comfort with them. As you start scaling, have a sort of constant voice that you want, or start introducing more policies in it. And if you scale like Quora, then of course start using tools and build, automation, build more processes around moderation. I want to pick this question from Leon. Seems very relevant. He's asked, these days we all have moderation in almost all platforms. So, for example, a Slack or a Facebook or a WhatsApp. But people keep passing these guidelines and somehow slip to the cracks and upload news that is harmful. So, how are you guys tackling this? I think Avni, you have already sort of answered this. Any of you, Aswati or Shelton, wants to take this?
Sure. So in the initial days, I used to communicate personally with the community member who violated the policy. So I'd go to their inbox. I would tell them this is why a certain answer or a comment was taken down. And this is the policy that I'm referring to. So I send them a link. Quora has a lot of help articles present. So I would send them a link and I would tell that, okay, this is what has happened, right? And it is also important that you consciously take efforts to educate your community about the policies. It could be a part of your onboarding process or your welcome message, or you could reach out to them separately at a later point in time, because probably you don't really want to overwhelm them, as soon as they join your community with all these rules and restrictions, right? So you could talk to them at a later point in time. But then I think you should have a very tiered approach, as in, when a person violates a policy, you first talk to them and then you make them aware. Then you could send them a warning, right? And you could have an escalation process set up. And if the person keeps violating your policies, then the person is not letting other community members feel safe around the community. So you may have to take a hard decision, right? So that tiered approach is very important. That's what we did in Quora.
Got it. I think Neha has written in the chat, one of the things is, of course, if you can build some automation to stop these bad actors. Today there are tools which sort of get plugged in, and like for example Discord, I'm sure we'll have a bot for this where you can potentially stop a potential keyword that from being sent. So like you said, I think there are always going to be workarounds, but as a platform, in my view as well, you have to keep improving your algorithms. I think Avni has also shared that Meta also uses AI to sort of flag these bad actors and bad activities. Got
Yes.
it. Yeah, Avni, go ahead.
Yeah, and I just, so I think the Meta experience contrasted with the experience that I had at Chiro's. We built the system while I was there. And so not only was there like a natural language model to catch particularly things like bad words, links, other things. We, at one point in time, we had an army of Oriflame ladies spamming all of our communities with links to become Oriflame representatives, literally the same cut and paste sales promo. So that was also interesting. But the flip side of that was the human intervention, I think what Aswati was talking about. So we had an escalations channel on Slack and on WhatsApp. So on Slack during normal business hours, and it happened on WhatsApp so that people could get banned. Interestingly, in a women's community, a lot of strange people want to show up and share pictures of things that they shouldn't be sharing. So I saw a lot of that in my day over there. But yeah, I wanted to sort of contrast. Whereas at Facebook and Meta, it was all AI and our systems did everything automatically. And then there's a layer of human intervention at the support level. So it was interesting to see it being built from the ground up.
Got it. So now we're talking about systems. I want to quickly pick up my next set of questions. Maybe we can start with Shelton. What are some of the tools that are available for community managers in your experience, especially with I think you guys are on Discord, right?
Yeah.
And very focused on, let's say, moderation related stuff.
Yeah, so I think Discord probably is one of the most powerful community building tools there. One, and I think big upside is that it's free largely. But Discord has a lot of bots. So we actually have two bots that we use. One is a Me6 bot, which is a bot you can integrate with Discord. And essentially, regardless of this Me6 bot or not, there are bots that you can integrate with your app, with your platform, that you can use to flag, say, certain words, links, right? Certain URLs that people may be posting. Discord also on itself has a default bot, that you can type in keywords and ask it to flag it. And, you can get notified in different measures like that. You can so there's a lot of customization, right? So I know there are, if you're a community builder, you can't be on your system 24 hours a day. Right. So there are ways to get yourself notified over email, or if it doesn't escalate to you, it can escalate to someone else. Right. So at Stoa, we use the Automod bot, which is by default there on Discord. And we also integrate the Me6 bot, which is really not that expensive. There's a paid tier, there's a free tier. The paid tier is also annual and it comparatively not that costly, for a one-time use. I would definitely recommend that. And I think one thing very important to remember, right? When you're thinking about systems to integrate, right? Think about what is the purpose and what really are you trying to optimize by introducing this system then. Again, I'll give you context behind this. I remember when we were at 100 members, 150 members in our store community. I remember the founder asking me hey, should we have some, should we use this app? Should we use this tool? And of course, as the space was being built, a lot of folks would reach out, they know you're a community builder. They'll say, hey, try these tools, etc. And the thing I stood back on is we don't need this right now. It's 150 members. We are a 2-member team. It is still manageable. And so far behavior is good, right? And also it throws your members off guard as well, right? Also when you're introducing a system, how you also need to think about how do you inform your users that this new system is in place. Because the thing is, a lot of your every community, your members are averse to change, right? Just like all of us are, right? Tomorrow your boss comes and says hey, you got to work XYZ number of hours. You're going to be averse to that, right? You're going to have a reaction to that. So similarly, you also have to think about the second order effects of introducing a new system and what is the right time to introduce that system. And how do you, and again, you can't do something overnight. You can't just introduce a system that says all blanket moderation in it, right? Like which probably blocks all the cuss words that exist. Because sometimes, like for example, in the store community, we do have spaces where we do allow people to have a bit more freedom to express themselves, if I have to put it that way, right? Which is needed in some way. So we knew that we did not want to have blanket moderation there as well, right? So again, we observed behaviors and accordingly we realized what are certain red flags, what is harming or what is causing more harm to the community, what has higher downside effects, and accordingly, very gradually use these tools better over time, right? So I mean, again, we try to avoid a direct plug and play model of say we have a new tool or app and really gradually introduce that within the community.
Understood. Any processes, Avni and Aswati? I think Aswati, you talked about the 3-step, awareness and are there any other processes that you guys or frameworks that you guys have used in terms of moderation?
So there was a ticketing system. Users can appeal whenever their content is being taken down, right? So if the reason is not very clear to them, there is a system where the moderator can specifically say why it's being taken down. But then if the user needs more explanation on that, then they can appeal. And they can question the moderation action, right? So that system was available in Quora, and yes, that's pretty much it. And rest of it, the community manager would talk to the person directly, and the community manager was always available to answer all these queries the users had, right? And it was a continuous process where the users were made aware of each and every policy out there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. It was a very simple system, but it was also very, very effective because users had a chance to question the actions taken. So that gave them some sort of power, yes. So
got it. So yeah, my next section is to sort of, I think it's very relevant now. A lot of our communities, that we've seen are also thinking of offline as a very important channel to, not just grow, but build belonging, and moderation is not just online, it's also offline. So I want to understand from this panel, what are some of the things that change or some of the best practices for offline community building? Shelton, I know that you guys have done phenomenal events. I remember the train event, which became very popular. What changes, and are there a couple of things that you would strongly recommend people in terms of moderation for offline community building?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time we had to do something offline and my blood pressure went to the roof because, bringing people together in person, especially post the pandemic, right, I think, again, I mostly overthunk it at that point because we were so good at doing things online at that point, right? So offline felt weird. But here's the analogy that I use. I use the analogy of a house party. I used to host a lot of house parties back in college, and honestly, that helped me a lot in community building. And just one of the differences between offline and online is online often is perpetual. It's 24/7. It's around the clock. You don't know when your users are online, right? They could be active at many different points, and you have limited oversight over there. I think one of the benefits in offline, and maybe one of the simpler sides of moderation in offline, is you have few hours, right? So if you're doing a meetup, it's going to be for 3 hours. If you're doing an offsite, it's going to be for 3 days. And but however, in person is where also things can get tricky, because you also have, when people are together in person, you also are very clear to a lot of behavioral things, a lot of physical cues. Body language comes into play. So it's not just words being typed down on a channel. It's not just video. It's not just chat. and especially bringing people together from different backgrounds. Like there are cultural differences, there are behavioral differences, and something that so you have to also give a lot of your. I think a tip that I would give anyone who's trying to go from online to offline is pay attention to the little things, right? Pay attention to the little things, like how you design your space, right? Like how do you want people seated? What kind of music are you going to play? How are you going to open the event? Because a lot of these things you can easily take for granted when you're doing things online. Because when it comes to online, all you have to do is log in. You can type a message and someone will reply. In an offline event, I've seen people standing alone in a corner, right, for hours and no one coming to talk to them. So as a community builder, I mean, rather than, I think the moderation part comes later, but I think the initial part is, you really have to pay a lot of attention to things that maybe you do take for granted when you're running online. So how do you get people to feel more comfortable with each other? How do you break the ice? You can't do simple icebreakers. You can't drop people into a breakout room here. It does take a lot more human effort. And I would say, although one of the advantages of offline is, again, when you're onboarding people online, you can send them rules, you can send them guidelines. You have no guarantee that they've read them. But when it's offline, you can make people sit down and you can spend 10 minutes explaining each and everything, and also explaining all the consequences of the downsides of that. And I think it's easier to get people to buy in that way, and at least the level of awareness of what they should do and not do is a lot more clear. Of course, there are edge cases, and of course, there are things I think that can go wrong or can happen. And I think really you need to have processes for damage control there, right? You need to create spaces where people can be comfortable enough to come to you or someone from your team to share a grievance or to share a challenge that they are facing. I don't know if that answers your question, but would happy to.
No, I think it does. Definitely does. Lot of insights there. I think for me, one of the biggest insight was, how Aswati said earlier, you make sure that people know about the moderation policies. In offline, if you can spend maybe 5-10 minutes on that, it's much easier to sort of create that adherence in the event or in the offline activity. Avni, anything on your experience here?
Yeah, I have a very funny experience from a Sheroes event. I want to plus one everything that Shelton said. We used to run really large global events at Meta for our partners. And so we would fly everyone to California, and just understanding, in this case, it wasn't even that you had to cultivate the space in one way. You had to do it in 5 different ways, because there are people from different regions all around the world who think very differently about what makes them comfortable, when they feel comfortable talking, all of that stuff. So plus one to all that. The one point I wanted to bring up is Priya Parker talks about the importance of curating your guest list when you have in real life events. And the one thing about her book that sticks out to me the most is she says, you need to decide who's not supposed to be in the room. That's more important than who you're inviting. Because if you have the wrong people at an in real life event, the whole thing can derail. And I'll give you an example. Sheroes traditionally runs a set of summits that are women oriented in the big metros in India every single year. When I was working there, I used to MC the events. So in our Delhi event, Delhi is where Sheroes was headquartered. It's our flagship event. We would have 1,000, 2,000 women at this event, big ballroom setting. And we are having a little sharing session after a panel discussion. I'm on the mic as the MC, and this uncle, who is not the TG for Sheroes, takes the mic and proceeds to he won't give up the mic. He won't stop talking, and he starts talking about dharma and karma and yoga. It has nothing to do with what we're discussing. And so we had to gently figure out a way, and also very respectfully, because he was an elder, to let him understand that this was not the time or the place, and we'd love to speak to him further. And there'll be, please feel free to share your blog with everyone in the networking hour. But it just taught me that, yeah, it's great to say that you have 2,000 people in a room, but if your TG is women and you've got a room full of uncles who are trying to take like, that's not curation. It's not effective curation. And so that's also a really key part of the experience building, is figuring out who absolutely needs to be there and who absolutely does not need to be there. There's slightly more leeway with that in a digital community space, because you can just delete, boop, boop, bye. You can't do that in real life. So it was just a big lesson for me in making sure that we're really careful on who we let into our events in the future. But it was a nightmare for me as an MC, a nightmare.
Cool. I think we have just a minute, so I'll just ask one final question before wrapping up this event. It's very important, especially for brand communities to have inclusivity built in from early days, right? So how do you use moderation to build, like, to make sure that there is enough inclusivity? How does moderation play a role in that? Any anecdote, any experience on that? Anyone, guys?
I mean, I have some. So at Facebook and Meta, a lot of our communities were global in nature. And so, one of the things I alluded to before was making sure the moderation team is active during different time zones. Like, there are people that are online when the people in Cape Town are online, or Bangalore is online. Big tech companies tend to all be based in Silicon Valley, California. And so that was like a really eye-opening experience for my team to know that they needed to resource appropriately, or this was a time cost to the program manager who was going to be online when people in India were awake, or people in Singapore was awake. So I definitely think that that's one thing to consider, is that when we talk about the circadian rhythm of community and global communities, that can vary. And so there would be a majority voice, but don't make sure you're not ignoring the minority time zones and the other voices that are there. I think the other thing to consider here is that, aside from just thinking about the actions that you're taking, who is taking those actions need to be reflective of the community that you seek to serve. So make sure your moderation team looks like the community. I think that's like super basic. And then share with the community who is on the moderation team, so that they know that, oh, okay, well, there's a pregnant mother from Australia on the moderation team. She's going to understand how I feel. So those are just two very quick things that I would love to add about this. These have been best practices for me, and they've served me well.
Sure. Shelton, Aswati, you want to add anything to it?
Sure. So at Quora, we had a huge list of words, derogatory words, disrespectful words that were used against minorities. And the algorithm would flag any content, regardless of how good it is, how good the rest of the content is. It would be flagged down if one of these words were used. Same way, any comment or any piece of content that shames women or any minority, again, would be taken down. No questions asked, nothing, right? So that was very, very important. And we did it very religiously, very diligently. And that made sure that we had more women participating, more people with, unpopular opinions participating in active discussions. So yes, these are some of the examples I can think of.
Got it. Shelton, any final words?
So I think, in Stoa's context, I think we are a bit lucky in terms of moderation, because, people pay and there are high guidelines that they kind of have to adhere to. So I think the point on inclusivity I will give is, double down on what you're trying to encourage to happen there. So again, we are a business community. So, and again, people varying years of experience, different kinds of industries. So one of the simple rules we have is there is no such thing as a dumb question, right? Because we are a learning community, and people should not, one thing we do know that a lot of people, especially introverts or people who do have social anxiety, they are terrified of, being judged. right? Like, or putting, say, framing something in the wrong way, and getting mocked at. And so one thing that we do right at the start, like right from onboarding and induction, is reinforce certain values that, and also give people visibility to see how these play out in the long run. So every older cohort almost acts like a Sherpa to the newer cohort coming in, right? Like they actually kind of set the culture, cascade that culture for new people coming in. And again, I think we've done a decent job at that. I don't think anything's perfect. So I think that's the point I would give. That's how that would be my answer to that question from our context.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Avni, Aswati, Shelton. I think I took away a lot of takeaways from this. I can already imagine in my mind, a lot of these snippets coming out of it. Very, very insightful. I love the diversity of sort of subtopics we covered in moderation today. And I hope all of you could take away at least one actionable insight. We discussed this in our pre-event catch-up that for like the four of us, big goal will be like, can each of you take one actionable insight and you can implement it in your community? And I really hope, this was the case for you guys. So yeah, thank you everyone. I look forward to see you in our next event.